Eleanor Frost stepped off the city bus, her gym bag slung casually over one shoulder, a faint sheen of sweat cooling on her skin from the brisk morning run she had cut short to make it on time. The early spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp concrete and blooming lilacs from the hospital's landscaped gardens. St. Jude's Hospital loomed ahead, its glass facade gleaming under the brightening sky, a stark contrast to Eleanor's simple attire: navy leggings, a loose athletic top, and worn sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in a quick ponytail, strands still damp, framing her determined face. The automatic doors slid open with a quiet whoosh as she stepped inside. The imposing marble lobby buzzed with a quiet urgency. Nurses in starched white uniforms moved briskly, doctors exchanged clipped greetings, and administrators coordinated with precise efficiency. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh coffee. Eleanor's sneakers echoed softly against the polished floors, a subtle reminder that she was out of place. A few eyes flicked her way, professional yet calculating, with an unmistakable thread of judgment in their gaze. As she moved toward the nurse's station, a tall woman clad in a crisp scrub suit caught sight of her. Angela Hayes, known for her no-nonsense attitude and sharp tongue, narrowed her eyes, instantly sizing Eleanor up. Her lips curled into a dismissive smirk. Without hesitation, Angela called out, loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Hey, you." "Yeah, you, orderly. Grab those patient charts from records on the second floor. We're swamped." Eleanor's heart tightened momentarily, but her expression remained neutral. Angela's voice carried the implicit mockery, the thinly veiled sarcasm about Eleanor's casual clothes, as if she were some low-level temp or cleaning staff. The words stung not because of their content but the assumption Eleanor's reality was about to prove very different. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line as Angela's sharp command echoed behind her. The bustling atmosphere of St. Jude's didn't pause for the momentary sting, and Eleanor felt the familiar pulse of adrenaline start to rise. She didn't turn back or snap at Angela. Instead, her voice was steady and even as she said, "Right away," a phrase neutral enough not to contradict the assumption outright, but vague enough to raise no suspicions. Without breaking her calm, Eleanor pivoted on her heel and headed in a different direction, bypassing the direction to records altogether. Instead of hauling charts, she slipped toward the Human Resources Department, a quiet sanctuary amid the controlled chaos. Her simple gym shoes made barely a sound, but the weight of her presence seemed to stir the air differently as she passed. Nurses paused mid-step, whispers briefly stirring in her wake. Did the orderly have a meeting? Why didn't she go to records? Inside the HR office, Martin Ellis looked up from his desk as she entered. The hospital director, a figure known for his commanding presence yet approachable demeanor, rose slowly, a smile spreading across his face. "Eleanor Frost," he said warmly, extending a hand. "I've been expecting you. Welcome to St. Jude's." The warmth in Martin's voice was a sharp contrast to Angela's cold dismissal, and Eleanor returned his handshake, the tension easing from her shoulders ever so slightly. "Thank you, Martin," she said. "I'm looking forward to working together." Martin gestured toward a chair across from his desk. "Let me be clear for everyone's sake. You are not here to fetch charts or run errands. You are the new chief nursing officer, responsible for managing all nursing staff, overseeing patient care quality, and developing hospital-wide protocols. We've had a lot of turnover in that position. Your experience and leadership are exactly what this place needs." Eleanor nodded, appreciating the directness. "I intend to make the most of the role," she replied with quiet confidence. Meanwhile, the corridor outside HR was buzzing with a different kind of energy. Angela had already started regaling anyone who would listen about the new orderly, and how she'd put her in her place. Her voice carried a boastful edge, punctuated by glances of superiority. She looked like she just rolled out of bed, Angela muttered to a cluster of young nurses near the station. Sweaty, casual, the whole deal. Honestly, I don't get how someone dressed like that could even be hired here. But I made sure she knows who's boss. Her audience giggled, trading speculative looks. Some shared casual mocks, others waited for the deal to be sealed. The orderly would be humiliated, exposed as a nobody. No one suspected the truth. Back in the HR office, Martin leaned forward, clasping his hands. You might want to be cautious. There's resistance here, resistance to change, and to leadership that doesn't show up in a $1 million suit. His eyes twinkled with dry humor. I suspect some people will be caught off guard. Eleanor met Martin's gaze evenly. Good. It's not my style to fit into the expected mold anyway. The hospital's focus should be on care, not appearances. Martin nodded approvingly. Exactly. And your decision to come straight from a run, well, it's unusual, but it might just be the energy this hospital needs. Eleanor smiled faintly, recognizing that her attire, chosen deliberately, would either be an immediate distraction or a subtle statement. She had made the choice to arrive simply dressed not out of neglect but to observe the hospital's normal rhythms, to see the staff's raw reactions when no titles or fancy outfits announced her authority. It would be a small test, and she intended to learn from it. Martin stood and motioned toward the door. I'll let the staff meeting start soon. This introduction will clarify everything. Until then, try not to lose your nerve. He gave her a reassuring nod. Eleanor rose, steady and collected. I won't, she said. As she left the HR office, a few employees recognized her and paused, eyes widening in surprise. Eleanor's presence was becoming a quiet undercurrent of speculation, gradually rippling through the hospital's complex social fabric. Meanwhile, Angela's bragging frenzy continued unabated. She smirked as she told her latest audience how she'd made the new girl fetch charts and how she'd been clearly out of place, underscoring how no one here buys the idea she's anything but a temp trying to play dress up. A young nurse raised an eyebrow. You really think she's low-level? Didn't you see her talk to the director? Angela waved dismissively. That doesn't mean anything. The director talks to everyone. I'm telling you, she doesn't have the credentials we need. Within the cluster of whispers and quiet chuckles, a few nurses exchanged skeptical glances. Eleanor's demeanor, subtle and controlled, was rewriting their expectations without a single word of correction from her. Through the halls, staff resumed their routines, but beneath the surface, the hospital's social order was shifting, unnoticed by most but keenly felt by a select few. Eleanor paused by the nurse's station, catching fragments of the conversation. Her pulse didn't quicken in frustration or anger. Instead, a quiet resolve settled over her. She knew the path ahead wasn't going to be smooth, but as she glanced around the bright, humming hospital, she felt the subtle thrill of the challenge ahead, a challenge she was more than ready to face. The fluorescent lights of the hospital's morning conference room buzzed softly overhead as nurses, doctors, and administrative staff began to file in. The chatter was subdued but carried an undercurrent of curiosity and speculation. The usual morning meeting for departmental updates was unusually crowded today. Whispers moved like ripples through the room as people exchanged guesses about the new face rumored to have taken a leadership role at St. Jude's. Angela Hayes pushed her way toward an empty seat near the front, a smug smile fixed on her lips. She wore her crisp scrub suit with practiced ease, her sharp eyes scanning the room with an unspoken challenge. To her, this was just another opportunity to watch the orderly fail publicly. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with antiseptic as Martin Ellis entered the room, the hospital director carrying the kind of quiet authority that commanded immediate attention. Good morning, everyone, Martin began, his rich voice cutting through the murmur. Thank you for gathering so promptly. Today, we have an important introduction, someone who will be instrumental to the future of our nursing department and, by extension, our hospital's care quality. Heads turned as the door at the back opened. Eleanor Frost stepped inside. Her gym attire was still evident, the navy leggings, the simple top, her hair still pulled back in a ponytail, but today she carried herself differently. There was a crispness in her step, a calm command in her posture that was impossible to ignore. Angela's smug smile faltered as she took in the sight. The woman she had so confidently dismissed as a lowly orderly was not only here for a public introduction but standing at the threshold with a quiet but unmistakable authority. The gathering grew hushed, the previously buzzing whispers settled into an expectant silence. Martin gestured toward Eleanor. "Everyone, please welcome Eleanor Frost, our new Chief Nursing Officer." The weight of the title settled in the room instantly. Eleanor moved to the front and took her seat at the head of the table, her gaze calm but unwavering. Angela shifted in her seat, discomfort flickering across her usually composed features. For a moment, Angela simply stared, the disbelief washing over her in waves. Her mind raced. How had she mistaken the new leader for the lowest rung? How had she so confidently teased and ordered Eleanor moments ago? Her embarrassment was as loud as the silence in the room, though she dared not speak. The head nurse Mary Jensen, seated next to Angela, leaned in discreetly. "She's the one, Angela." The director vetted her thoroughly. Angela's mouth pressed into a thin line as she tried to choke back her discomfort. A few colleagues shot her sympathetic but knowing looks. No one spoke for a long beat. The shift from mockery to respect was palpable. Eleanor's voice finally broke the silence as she calmly began to address the staff. "Thank you, Martin, and thank you all for welcoming me. I'm deeply honored to assume the role of Chief Nursing Officer here at St. Jude's." Her tone was warm but firm, resonating with the room's suddenly attentive audience. As she spoke, the casual appearance that had unsettled many of them melted away, replaced by clear conviction and a quiet strength. Each word was measured, purposeful. Angela swallowed hard. Her earlier smirk was gone, replaced by a tightness in her jaw. The sudden reversal of fortune left her searching for footing amidst the stunned crowd. Eleanor carefully outlined her priorities: improving patient safety protocols, streamlining nursing workflows, and fostering an environment where every staff member's contribution was valued, regardless of rank or appearance. She spoke of accountability, teamwork, and the importance of seeing beyond surface impressions. When a nurse at the back raised a cautious hand to ask about the casual attire she'd chosen for today, Eleanor smiled. "I came directly from my morning workout. I dressed simply on purpose. There's value in observing day-to-day operations without the usual signals of status getting in the way. I want to see how this team functions at its core." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Some staff exchanged knowing glances, appreciating the humility and honesty behind her choice. Martin nodded, adding, "Her extensive experience includes leading nursing teams at major urban hospitals where she implemented transformative changes. Eleanor is not here to conform but to lead by integrity and results." Angela's discomfort deepened as the room's tone shifted firmly from judgment to respect. The colleagues who had once snickered at the idea of the orderly being chief now listened with rapt attention. The power of titles and credentials was undeniable, but Eleanor's demeanor was the true catalyst for change. Though quietly, Angela began to realize the stakes. Her scorn and dismissiveness had not just been misplaced, they had publicly exposed her own narrow judgment. She ducked her head slightly, aware that her peers were beginning to view her skepticism less favorably. The meeting drew to a close with Eleanor confirming she would begin her rounds shortly and inviting open dialogue with staff. She encouraged everyone to hold her accountable and to approach her directly with any concerns or ideas. As the attendees rose to leave, many approached Eleanor with tentative smiles and polite greetings. Angela lingered near the back, hesitant but unable to retreat completely. Her mind churned with the sting of her mistake, and despite the embarrassment, a part of her recognized the potential in Eleanor's leadership. The corridor outside the conference room bustled as Eleanor moved forward. Nurses and doctors fell into step around her, offering small nods of respect. The initial shock of her arrival had given way to the beginning of acceptance. Angela watched quietly, the sting of her unmet assumptions sharp but tempered by a grudging acknowledgement. Eleanor Frost was no orderly, she was the new chief nursing officer, and the hospital's culture was about to shift in ways Angela hadn't anticipated. The conference room emptied, but the momentum Eleanor Frost had ignited remained palpable, as if an invisible current of change had begun to ripple through St. Jude's Hospital. Those who stayed, nursing supervisors and select department leaders, lingered to hear more. Martin Ellis gestured toward Eleanor, motioning her to speak further. Taking a measured breath, Eleanor leaned forward slightly, a calm authority settling over her words. "I'd like to share a bit about my background," she began. "Before coming here, I was chief nurse at Harborview Medical Center for 5 years. There, I managed a team of over 200 nurses, and together, we reduced patient wait times by 30% through streamlined scheduling and tech integration. I also led initiatives that improved patient satisfaction scores significantly, focusing not only on medical care but on emotional support." She glanced around the room, noting eyes now fixed intently on her. "Leadership is about more than titles," Eleanor said, "it's about service. That's why I chose to come straight from my morning workout. I wanted today to be a day of observation, of seeing how this hospital breathes without layers of hierarchy or pretense." Angela Hayes sat stiffly in the corner, the chill of discomfort wrapping tighter around her. She could no longer pretend that Eleanor's simple attire masked incompetence. Instead, she was forced to face an undeniable reality. Here was a woman whose credentials rivaled any of their own, whose impact had been proven, and whose presence demanded respect. Martin added seamlessly, "Eleanor's leadership philosophy emphasizes humility, grit, and a belief that every staff member, from nurse to orderly, plays a vital role. She's not here to enforce top-down control but to partner with the team to raise standards and build trust." Nods of agreement followed, the staff exchanging glances that spoke of cautious hope. There was a subtle but unmistakable shift in the atmosphere, as walls built by skepticism began to erode. Eleanor continued, "I believe great leaders dress practically and lead by example. I want to hear from each of you, not just about policies, but about what it's really like to work here on the floor, to face the challenges that aren't written in reports." She paused briefly, then smiled gently. "I also recognize how appearances can shape perceptions, sometimes unfairly. That's why I want to be upfront. I arrive not as an outsider trying to change everything overnight but as a colleague willing to listen and learn." Her straightforwardness quietly disarmed the tension that had clung to the room like an unwelcome shadow. The crisp, clinical space seemed to soften as empathy took root. Angela's fingers curled tightly around the edge of her chair. The room's softened mood didn't erase the sting of her earlier misjudgment. But beneath the pang, a sliver of reluctant admiration took hold. Eleanor's approach was resolutely fair, firm yet open, a style Angela hadn't anticipated but couldn't easily dismiss. Just then, a nurse named Julia Matthews raised her hand. "Chief Frost," Julia said, voice steady but respectful, "will you be addressing concerns about understaffing during the night shifts? That's been a major issue impacting patient care." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Absolutely. Staffing is a priority. I want us to work on solutions collaboratively, balancing resources with care quality. No policy can succeed without frontline insight." The conversation unfolded, honest and direct, as Eleanor listened intently and responded with clarity. Her open engagement began to chip away at old divides. Later, in a quieter moment as staff started to disperse, Martin turned toward Eleanor. "Your decision to wear gym clothes today, it definitely unsettled some people, but it also made a statement." Eleanor smiled faintly. "It was intentional. I wanted to observe the hospital without assumptions clouding the view. I'm interested in how people behave when they don't know who you are, when titles are invisible." Martin chuckled. "Bold move. You've certainly made an impression." Eleanor's gaze wandered briefly toward Angela, who was packing up her things, eyes fixed downward. "Appearances matter," Eleanor said softly, "but how we treat people when there's no expectation, that's what reveals real character." Martin nodded in agreement. "I think this hospital is ready for that kind of leadership." Over the next hour, Eleanor made her rounds with a quiet focus, engaging nurses and aides alike. She listened carefully to their insights about workflow difficulties, communication gaps, and patient needs. Rather than issuing instant directives, she asked questions that encouraged openness and reflection. Angela shadowed Eleanor awkwardly at first, resistance tempered by restrained curiosity. The confident young nurse who had lashed out was now tentative, unsure where her place would be in this new order. Eleanor noticed but offered no immediate judgment. Her style was deliberate, patience over confrontation. She wanted to build trust before challenging old habits. During a brief pause in the hallway, an older nurse commented quietly, "You know, she's different from the directors we've had before. No airs. Just business and respect." Angela watched the exchange, wordless. Remorse flickered in her eyes but was buried beneath layers of pride and uncertainty. As the shift wound down, Eleanor gathered the senior nursing staff for a brief debrief. Her instructions were clear yet collaborative, reinforcing her expectations without alienating the team. "Let's commit to honesty and accountability," she said. "Mistakes happen, but learning from them in a supportive environment is what counts. I expect us all to hold ourselves, and each other, to high standards." The room absorbed her words with a new openness, the tension replaced by tentative optimism. At day's end, Eleanor relaxed slightly, reflecting on the first hours in her new role. She understood resistance was inevitable, but her measured approach and unwavering professionalism had already started to recalibrate the hospital's culture. Angela, meanwhile, left the hospital with a mix of emotions: embarrassment, surprise, and a growing, unexpected respect for Eleanor Frost. The orderly was not just an outsider in gym clothes, she was a leader whose quiet strength promised to challenge everything they thought they knew. The hospital's corridors, once filled with whispered judgments, now echoed faintly with the sound of new possibilities taking root. The next morning, the hospital's atmosphere was distinctly different, attention diffused, replaced by a tentative curiosity mixed with a newfound respect. Eleanor walked through the corridors with measured steps, her calm presence already a steadying force among the staff. Today, she was no longer the woman in gym clothes nervously navigating a polished institution. She had moved fully into her role, and the hospital sensed the change. In the administration office, Martin Ellis sat across from Angela Hayes. The senior nurse's usual confidence was replaced by a lowered gaze and tight shoulders. "Angela," Martin began, his tone firm but fair, "I want to discuss your behavior yesterday during rounds. Your manner toward Eleanor was disrespectful and undermined the professionalism we expect here at St. Jude's." Angela lifted her eyes briefly, the flicker of embarrassment unmistakable. I didn't realize." Martin held up a hand. "You did realize, and that's the problem. I am placing you on a formal reprimand. Additionally, you will be relieved of your duties as senior nurse coordinator for the next month." During this time, you'll attend leadership and professionalism workshops. We all make mistakes, but we must learn from them. The weight of the consequences settled on Angela, and though she was stung, there was no argument. Martin continued, "Our goal is growth and better patient care. I expect you to approach this as an opportunity." Angela nodded slowly, the pride still fighting with the humility she was forced to adopt. News of the reprimand spread quickly among the nursing staff. Some who had been quietly critical of Angela's attitude felt a sense of vindication, while others saw the hospital reaffirming its standards sharply and clearly. Conversations shifted. Whispers of Eleanor's competence and leadership replaced the gossip that had previously swirled around her appearance. In the nursing station, Julia Matthews caught Eleanor's eye and smiled genuinely. "I think we're going to see good changes under your leadership," she said quietly. Eleanor returned the smile, a flicker of relief passing through her. "It will take all of us working together. I'm here to listen and support." Later that afternoon, Eleanor made her rounds again, stopping to speak with nurses and support staff. Each exchange reinforced the growing respect around her. Small challenges were addressed with reason, complaints met with listening ears, successes acknowledged with genuine warmth. Angela found herself lingering in the staff lounge, watching Eleanor interact. There was no longer mockery in her gaze but a quiet struggle to reconcile her past assumptions with the reality of Eleanor's steadiness and competence. Finally, Eleanor approached Angela in the hallway near the nurses' station. The corridor felt charged with unspoken tension as they stopped a few feet apart. Angela looked up, meeting Eleanor's calm eyes. "I want to apologize for yesterday," she said, voice low but sincere. "I misjudged you. I acted poorly, and I'm sorry." Eleanor assessed the apology with careful thought before responding. "Thank you, Angela. It takes courage to admit that. I believe in moving forward, not dwelling on mistakes. Let's focus on the work ahead together." The exchange was brief but meaningful, a quiet hand extended across a widening divide. As the day wound to a close, Eleanor walked through the hospital with steady confidence. Staff passed her with nods and greetings. Patients noticed the assurance in her manner. The gym clothes were gone, replaced by a simple but crisp professional top and tailored pants. Still practical, still unpretentious. But it was Eleanor's quiet authority, forged through experience and empathy, that truly transformed the environment. She paused at a window overlooking the hospital's garden, inhaled deeply, and turned to rejoin the flow of the busy wards. Here, in the heart of St. Jude's, Eleanor Frost was no longer just a newcomer. She was a leader embraced and trusted, ready to guide the hospital's nursing team to a future defined by respect, excellence, and true teamwork.